you.
So Councilwoman, can you just please state your first and last name?
Yes, Shameka Parrish-Wright. Do you need me to spell it? SHAMEKA PARRISH WRIGHT.
Now, have you seen the video?
Yes, I've watched the video twice, and my reaction was the same. It didn't make things more clear. It was what I found out through the process of working with the Homeless Law Center, that what had happened, and it's terrible. As somebody that was pregnant on the streets, I know a lot of that all too well. I went in labor, thankfully, at Wayside Christian Mission and was able to give birth to the daughter I have here today. I can't imagine what was running through that woman's head. But I do know she has visited our Vocal Kentucky office, and we had heard a few months ago that their RV was taken. She mentions that in the video, and we remember hearing about that. It wasn't the newest of RVs. My husband and I just bought a brand new trailer, so I know it was an older model, but it was the last $12,000 they had to purchase that. So when I read the statement from the mayor's office saying that, she could have given birth in deplorable conditions, and we don't want that for anybody, but you didn't follow up. You all didn't even take, I got confirmation directly that they didn't even take her to a hospital that had a labor and delivery. They dropped her off at Jewish, and another EMS had to come to Jewish to take her to, I think it's U of L. Yes, it's U of L, to take her to U of L to give birth. And all of our hospitals, that's the unique thing about our city, are in a 1 mile radius of each other. So you say that you care. She didn't even get to a hospital with a labor and delivery.
Talking about how just being in such a vulnerable position, she was pregnant, in labor, you have that whole experience of yourself. What what is that like for somebody in that position? How vulnerable are they at that time?
It's scary. And even in her most vulnerable moment, you see it out in the wild with animals when they're young, their young lives, or when they have kittens and offspring, you're very protective. You're angry, you're ready to protect. But she was very pleasant. She said, "Look, I'm going into labor. Okay. My husband went to call the ambulance. Okay." She kept trying to check in. She knew who they were as they approached her. And in that moment, you have the discretion to make the best decision at that moment. Was the best decision to further put this woman in stress and trauma, and give her another citation? Or was it saying, hey, I would have put her in my car and I would have driven her to the hospital? I've done that for people who are unhoused. I would do it and give a, and I understand that presents a safety concern. So if you don't want to do that, then okay, make sure that she gets the medical help, because that takes precedence. To me, there was no real crime happening there. There was poverty. There was somebody who, if you can find a way to rest or sleep under an overpass, what it takes to even fall asleep in those conditions is one thing, but to be woken up by Louisville Metro government and the police, and with a flashlight, and to be asked to move. I watched every one of those. I didn't hear any of them connect to resources. I just hear, where are you going? You're not supposed to be here. I'm giving you a citation. And that to me compounds the problem we have. And the other thing is, we don't own those properties, the overpasses, those highways, the underpasses. We don't technically own those. Those are state owned and funded and ran. So the city has a loose agreement, a memorandum of understanding, that they will loosely monitor and help with that. But you're spending our local tax dollars to do these aggressive encampment clearance. They're not blocking a sideway. No traffic was backed up. They're not causing any problem. You're using that to aggressively clear. And I've asked them for a clear breakdown of how much each one of these clearings costs. How much is the team? How much is the cars? The time for the police officers? All of that, because we don't have a true accounting of what that is. They just group everything in homeless services. That was not services. That was not a relocation. That was a clearing. Like, you're clearing something out so it never comes back. And if that woman was sitting there on mattresses in that condition, and your primary goal is to still cite her, that's not the policing we need or deserve. And that is not a crime being solved. That is adding trauma.
And you mentioned how it's not the policing people deserve, and this comes just as the consent decree finally came down. Do you think this further either breaks trust for the community and believing that change is really going to happen?
It definitely has broken trust with the community. From the feedback that I've gotten since I've talked about it, we released a formal statement, and all of the feedback, people are disgusted with what they saw. You know, they try to control all the narratives, but even with the raw footage of him narrating it, when he got back to that car, he said, I don't believe she's in labor. How can you know, and that's what many people, our vocal Kentucky members, and many people tell us all the time, that the police don't listen to you. You can tell them what's happening. You can be honest. You can say, hey, I know I'm in a bad spot right now, but give me an opportunity, and they don't listen. And someone has said, well, maybe because they hear excuses all the time. You have to treat each person on a case by case basis. You have to honor their dignity, their humanity, and you have to respect and listen to what they're saying is going on, or that's not compassion. That's not doing what's best for the community. And there was no other people around there except people who were unhoused and the people who came in to clear them out. So this wasn't a traffic or crowd control issue. This wasn't a big safety issue. Really, she was sitting there and waiting for the response to come. And then when the response come and you rush her, and then you even say to her as she's getting in the ambulance, you're not going to be a problem to them, are you? And then you grab her, you push her to come back where you're at. When, to me, if I was a police officer, I would definitely not have handled it that way.
And people have been critical of this as a repercussion of the Safer Kentucky
It
Act.
is.
Uh, do you think if that act wasn't in law right now, that wasn't a law right now, would this have happened?
Is that, and we need changes to our own camping ordinance locally. And I think that it is irresponsible of Representative Bowman, Representative Jason Nemes, and all the people who passed this legislation at the state level to pass such aggressive legislation with no real structure, with no real resources behind it. They're not paying for this. They're not getting any money to it. They've left it to the local municipalities to handle this, and they're doing whatever they think is they see fit. They haven't had the proper training. The DOJ has outlined the continuous issues with LMPD, and none of that's been resolved yet. We have the beginnings of this consent decree. So there hasn't been training. They don't know how to deal with our homeless community, and they're not contacting people like me and other folks who actually have been homeless, who work with the homeless community. They're not genuine. And for them to make a blanket piece of terrible legislation that is a copycat legislation that is happening all over this nation in different forms, and not put any real structure or not put any resources around, it is definitely is devastating, and it's costly. The KY policy has released a report that says the Safer Kentucky Act will cost over $1 billion as they are rolling it out. And we are already seeing they're also trying to create a whole court process, and find ways to use funding to have these resource days. All of these people are thinking about are the money end of it. I'm thinking about the humanity of that woman, the dignity she deserves, the dignity that every homeless person deserves. You have a person right now sitting in Metro government as an elected official who was homeless in Louisville 2 times. And you need to hear those voices so that we can make those choices. And if you don't have the directly impacted people involved, you don't get the real solutions that's needed. They cannot sit in their ivory tower and think that they can deal with this without dealing with the humanity of the people that we're supposed to be serving. Because most of all, this problem continues to grow. There's too many people in Louisville and surrounding counties who are housing insecure. So more homeless people will be out there. And it's irresponsible to do this kind of legislation. It needs to be repealed, but I know that they're too prideful to repeal it. So we're going to continue to track it, and we're going to do some things locally, legislation wise, to kind of push back on some of the negative impacts of this. And anybody that does homeless services need to be on board with the impact of this, because we're not in this to perpetuate homelessness. Wayside Christian Mission will never end homelessness because it's a shelter, but it is a start. But on any given day, we track how many beds are available. There's never more than 2 to 3 beds available. And for families, it's even worse. So there's not enough shelter beds. There is not, and they say we got more treatment beds per capita than any other place. That could be true, but there's not transportation, there's not connection to get people to those things. So that doesn't matter if people can't access them. And so now you're giving them citations, which leads to fines and fees and potential jail time, which will continue to overcrowd our jail, which will make these people who are pushing for a new jail say, oh, we need a new jail. Jail is not a place to house homeless people. Jail will not solve all of our issues. We have some of the highest numbers in the world. We're number 7 in the world for incarceration of Kentuckians. If jail was the answer, we would be there by now. We're not there, and building a new jail on the back of homeless people through citations they cannot pay, through putting them in jail, will not get us there. And I think that this problem is going to be more expensive, more costly in too many ways, that these people who approved this, which our mayor and his administration helped write the legislation for House Bill 5, which we've seen that it's a copycat legislation from the Cicero group out of Texas, who are doing this because people are fearing that what's happened through inflation, what's happening through wages not matching the real estate, what's happening all over our country. And they're trying to make House Bill 5 be a fixer. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not resourceful. It just gives more ways to criminalize people, like you saw with the pregnant woman. I'm thankful she is doing well, but none of Metro government services, none of the funding, none of the police funding went to even getting her in the shelter she is now in today with her little boy. They didn't even help do that. They didn't help put her up nowhere. So what services did they really provide except criminalization?
You talk about too finding ways locally to counteract almost the effects of House Bill 5. Is there anything you're looking into for 2025, a new legislative year? Anything in the works right now you're looking at doing?
Yeah, we're working with the Homeless Law Center. We're working with Coalition for the Homeless. There's a lot of people on it already. I even got a call from former Councilman Jacory Arthur, who's like, let's talk about how we can push some legislation that we need. I'm hoping that my colleagues are paying attention to how detrimental this can be